Equivalence does not negate difference. Oh yeah, yeah. So actually, just returning to return. So I think this might have been the first point she makes in her standalone books.
Hmm.
Um, Universalism, because down the line in these chats, the universal and the particular will take its own focus. But it's important to point this out. Her first point, universalism is not to be rejected, but to be particularized. Critique of the yeah, you just leave it there. So that was sort of the importance of that will become apparent because of course hegemony and social strategy is and this idea of radical negativity is sort of like an attack on the idea of the universal.
Hmm.
But yeah, not to be rejected, particularized. So
Excuse me.
equivalence doesn't negate difference. We need a we and a they for the politics, for political hegemonic engagement. Um, Nodal points should be established in war position, and total society is impossible. Always antagonisms.
Mm.
So I think at the root of those points actually is something is a critique of Hart and Negri, like I touched on already. Um, but this idea of equivalence not negating difference, the chain of equivalence in hegemonic and social strategy, um, the and I think we'll get onto examples of that a bit more in next chat. But it's just briefly, it's the for each given or in each given moment where there are antagonisms, the subject positions will, of course, identify with their grievance. Um, but in a hegemonic articulation, when a hegemonic project attempts to articulate itself as a movement in hegemonic and social strategy, as a political movement, a democratic movement, um, but in her later work as a populist movement, the identity of that movement, the subject position, is split between itself, like in the last tract, but not in terms of antagonism, but in terms of not in terms of difference, but in terms of equivalence. Actually, in their words, split between the original position, but also with the position of the empty signifier that comes to encapsulate the what's that term, the essence of the movement. Um, so here it's the particularizing of the universal. So it's not necessarily like a hegemonic articulation and a chain of equivalence, a popular movement of the left in terms of Lachlan Move's position isn't. I mean, it is a universal. It's a universal movement, as universal as it can possibly get. You know, it will strive to. They're not against getting a big popular movement, everyone together. You know, like a class society in 99% or whatever. Not a class society, but a class movement. Uh, their only issue is that traditional versions, modern, pre-postmodern conceptions of this, and not naive with respect to their time and place, but certainly sort of naive to our time and place, naively assumed that society could be the real and the rhetorical, I suppose, could be reconciled, that we could conceive of society to the point that we could, with high faith in ourselves, enact our vision,
Okay.
and everyone would be happy,
Hmm.
and we wouldn't need we could get to a post-political situation, communism,
Hmm.
universal global communism, everyone would be happy. But of course, that wouldn't be the case. But before that point, in getting to a movement, the universal can exist. The class subject, inverted commas, can exist as long as it isn't determined by something like class in the traditional sense.
Okay, or determined, I suppose, by, I guess, is in saying, the idea that what they were saying about how equivalence doesn't negate difference, and this idea of particularization, is it also in saying, it doesn't, as long as I guess, the universal or the class subject, or what was the term you used? Sorry, class subject or class identity? No, class subject. Yeah, the class subject isn't defined or articulated as. I mean, my reading of that would have been, my reading of that would have been within this hegemonic block, you will have one would assume a myriad of different subject positions, and in so different a myriad of different grievances, various struggles. The coming together of the universal, or what I think you refer to as like the high faith, like if I'm reading that as the same sort of thing, like the signifier, I suppose.
The traditional, the high faith was like say an orthodox or classical Marxist feeling that they knew enough about the world to demand the level of fealty and identity from a proletariat that constituted the class subject, that there wasn't anything else. There was only economism, and there was only this pathway, this doctrine. So that's what I meant by high faith, that they had enough faith in that doctrine that this was what to do. Sorry, go on. But your point probably stood alone beyond that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, my reading of it would be, this myriad of this various struggles and subject positions, the coming together in a universal. It doesn't negate the fact that they have this, this sort of plethora of various struggles, I suppose, which is like struggles and grievances, which they will, people will obviously identify with, but I guess just not to say identify on such a strong level that it, I guess, attempts to articulate the universal. I guess that's where the strategy, I suppose, comes into. It's finding a universal or an empty signifier universal. I guess actually,
that's a good distinction.
Universally, I mean, that was my initial reading of it, but it could be that it's just a little bit less, maybe without some of the backbone, I guess, or the meat, I guess, of the other books. It's my reading of that. Just that equivalence that will be formed within the, I guess, the fractured, the equivalent that we will use to, I suppose, reform the fractured.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reform the fractures or create a connective tissue doesn't negate within the universal the individual grievances or the individual struggles of these various groups, whereas it actually it's the strategy in that is that coming together of attempting the universal that is able to, I suppose, account for all these things or embody or hold all these things in the same net, so to speak. I don't know, maybe that's a terrible metaphor for
no, that works. Basket, whichever. It seems intuitive to us, I suppose, coming from like that anarchist community.
We've talked on this before, I think.
We recognize the importance of affinity groups and autonomous groups, and but the potentiality for them to find a commonality and come together and act together and coordinate, and so I think Move does touch on this and sort of claims that there was never, and to be honest, that's sort of Hart and Negri's thing as well, just without the sort of the hegemonic engagement that we're sort of touching on now. So it's a coming together of both. But like Moof we've talked about grassroots initiatives in agonistics and sort of critiques them for having a lack of focus. So, like I remember in 2001, and she mentions this instance in the book. But I remember in 2001 when the Argentinian peso kept collapsing, and they went through a series of governments, but like grassroots movements, like just continuously demanded the end of whatever given government. And I just remember it being amazing because the whole community would take to the streets and reappropriate all the businesses. Like they'd, because obviously if the economy's in shutdown and civil disobedience, the towns in shutdown, um, people need to eat, so they fucking get up and they start working for themselves, collectivizing and running through cooperatives, the bakery and whatever other necessities that were at hand, whatever resources. And but she dismisses these because ultimately society went on. A government came and stabilized the status quo eventually, and the movement never came to something. So she contrasts that with the May 15th, God, I can't remember, the Spanish.
The Indignados?
Yes.
I'm probably saying that very wrong. Podemos.
better than I could. So I think she I can't quite remember. I glanced over this bit. I remember reading it. I just didn't look at the notes basically this time around because I didn't think we'd be touching on it. But that it was either that or Syriza maybe. But basically, it attached itself, or a party attached itself to a grassroots movement and allowed for a focus to have impact on a wider scale. So now, to me, both instances lead to the continuation of status quo. However, both instances also have the potential to continue to connect with other similar movements and network. And while they didn't in those instances, Spain is ongoing, obviously, that socialist government at the moment is a result of this, right? The Indignados. Oh, I mean,
well, yeah, I mean,
Podemos.
Podemos. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they came out of that movement. Yeah.
So, the effect of that moment is yet to be known. But obviously, I mean, Syriza seems quite a dead duck. So regardless of the focus, it's not great. So I don't think Moof's point is entirely valid there to discount what happened in Argentina. So anyway, yeah, while it's intuitive to us, and the potentiality of radical come together is there, you, I think, articulated quite interestingly the difference between, I suppose, articulating a universal as an empty signifier, actually, rather than the means rather than the ends. So that's a big distinction. So, say, like a traditional Marxist would see communism as that final totality, that post-political situation, that like homogenized society, where antagonisms or any antagonisms that arise just aren't important enough to consider politically. I guess that's the thing, which is, sort of essentially what neoliberalism did as well. That's a different thing, to institute the universal on the basis of the privileged class subjective, where you're making demands for a final closed suturing of society, is totally different to the opening of an already instituted hegemonic suture, say that of neoliberalism or capitalism even, and through a discourse of the universal. Does that make sense? So there's like a huge difference. So like if you close something, if you close it with the universal, then you're either an incredibly successful authoritarian, or everyone's just going to die in civil war. But if you're opening an already closed suture through the idea, the myth, maybe this is Sorrel here, his general strike myth. Like general strikes won't do anything, but they'll at least maintain the working class identity as distinct to the owners of production.
Sure.
So that radical potential is there for the universal. And yeah, like I said, Mouffe says, it doesn't need to be rejected. It just needs to be particularized. And as you were saying, that seems quite intuitive to us.